up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea's new COVID-19 infections expected to be around 7,000 on Monday as Omicron continues to spread across the country. Also, from Monday, more exemptions will be given to South Korea's vaccine pass system. America's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, says he's as confident as you can be about the prospect of most states in the US reaching a peak of Omicron cases by mid-February, saying the pandemic may be heading toward an end game. The WHO says Omicron could infect 60% of Europeans by March. Plus, at least 120 people are killed in Syria as battles rage between US-backed Kurdish-led forces and Islamic State fighters after an attack on a prison in the northeast of the country.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. January 24th here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Mo-gyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Over the course of the next hour or so, we will be taking a look at the biggest news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world. Our top story this morning, though, South Korea saw 7,000 new COVID-19 cases over the weekend and reported the highest tally ever for a Sunday, in fact. Monday is expected to be another day close to 7,000. Also, starting this week, health authorities are pivoting towards what they are calling a new virus response, one that attempts to better cope with the spread of Omicron.
For more COVID-19 updates, we have our reporter Kim Yeon-seung here in the studio with us. Good morning, Yeon-seung.
Good morning.
So like we've touched upon, we actually expected the new infection cases to top 7,000 over the weekend, and it actually did.
Exactly. So South Korea topped 7,000 cases this Saturday for the first time in a month, with just 7,008 cases. And then on Sunday, cases soared even higher to 7,630, which is actually the second highest figure to be reported and the highest figures seen on a Sunday. If you look at the trend for the past week, you can see that just last Monday, the country reported fewer than 4,000 cases. So in less than a week, daily infections have nearly doubled.
And we hear as well that South Korea is expecting to see several thousand new cases again on this Monday.
Yes, exactly. So South Korea up to Sunday 9 p.m. logged 5,675 new cases. This is around 1,000 cases fewer than the same time Saturday night. But when the total tally is rounded up, it might just surpass that 7,000 mark.
So with the spread of the Omicron variant, authorities have changed some measures. But I heard that this week there are more changes that are happening.
Right, that's right, Woo-geun. So COVID-19 has been with us for a while now. And one of the latest focus of health authorities are really trying to counter the inconvenience and the inefficiency that certain measures hold. For example, one of the changes they're making from today is extending the vaccine pass waivers to people who've been hospitalized or experienced adverse health effects up to 6 weeks after inoculation. These people don't need to prove causality between the vaccinations and their adverse symptoms. They just need to show that they had side effects at their local health clinics, and then they'll get a waiver on their mobile Coup or QR code apps.
And we hear some other changes as well are coming in from this week. Tell us more about that.
Well, starting from Wednesday, South Korea will start phasing into a new Omicron-tailored virus response. The isolation period, for example, will be shortened for fully vaccinated patients to a week from 10 days. Also, beginning in regions that have seen alarming spreads of Omicron, namely Gwangju, Jeollanam-do Province, Pyeongtaek City, and Anseong City in Gyeonggi-do Province, health authorities are trialing a new virus response system. Under this new system, COVID-19 testing centers will test only high-risk groups and suspected infections with a PCR test. Everyone else will have to test themselves using a rapid antigen test kit. This will shorten the lines and speed up the process at testing centers. In these areas as well, local doctors and health clinics will also participate in testing and treating COVID-19 patients so that infected patients don't completely overwhelm the few selected COVID-19 clinics that we have on hand. Also, starting in Anseong City from Monday, local COVID-19 patients will be managed locally. What I mean by that is that COVID-19 patients used to be managed by the central government, and they decided where they will send these patients and treat these patients. But Ansong City officials are now in charge of that, of making that decision on a local scale.
So how exactly will these measures help?
Right. So one of the main concerns with Omicron is that considering how fastly and rapidly it's spreading, the sheer number of infected patients might overwhelm the medical sector, even though it's been linked with milder cases. So this measure will spread any burden across local doctors and allocate the limited medical resources that we have on hand efficiently to benefit high-risk groups of people and to prevent them from reaching critical cases.
Okay, and we have the 5-day-long Lunar New Year coming up at the end of this week, starting this weekend. Do we have any special preparations in place for that?
Yes, we do. So I'm sure many people are looking forward to this Lunar New Year holiday because they get the much needed rest they need. But unfortunately, there's some people who aren't going to be able to rest, and these people will be frontline medical workers. Seoul City on Sunday said that they're going to keep the doors open at testing centers, infectious diseases hospitals, and residential treatment centers. There's also going to be a hotline in place for emergency patients. Seoul City is also expanding transportation during the holidays so that people can leave Seoul on less crowded buses.
All right, let's hope there won't be, rapid spread over the holidays. Thank you so much for your report, Yansing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, as always, Yeon-seung. Now, moving on, with many parts of the world battling the rampant spread of the highly contagious Omicron variant, America's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, says he's highly confident the new strain will peak in most of the country by the middle of next month.
And across the Atlantic, saying the pandemic may be heading toward an endgame on the continent. A senior WHO official says Omicron could infect 60% of Europeans by March. Our Kim Hyo-san reports.
America's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, has expressed optimism about the pandemic, saying he expects the Omicron variant to reach its peak across most of the U.S. by mid-February. During an interview with ABC on Sunday, Fauci said things are looking good, but added Americans should not get overconfident. He noted there are some states in the Northeast and upper Midwest where cases have already peaked and declined rather sharply. But he added cases are still rising in southern and western states. In related news, the WHO's Europe director says Omicron could infect 60% of Europeans by March. He said the end of pandemic could be plausible in Europe after Omicron spread, but at the same time urged caution due to the ability of the virus to mutate. In Asia, Japan's new COVID-19 tally topped 50,000 for the second consecutive day on Sunday. Against its backdrop, Japanese authorities are mulling over whether to expand antivirus measures to more prefectures. While the measures are already in place in 16 prefectures, including Tokyo, the Japanese government is slated to announce new measures on Tuesday. In China, authorities confirmed that in January, 39 infections were identified during testing at the airport among members of foreign delegations arriving in Beijing for the 2022 Winter Olympics. Documents published by the Olympic Organizing Committee show 72 cases have been identified so far among over 2,500 delegation members who have arrived in China. The committee said no cases have been detected among the athletes that have arrived in the Chinese capital. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. South Korea's daily COVID-19 cases on Sunday continued the spike we've been seeing in recent days as the Omicron variant increasingly makes its presence felt here. However, the number of deaths has been on a gradual decline, and the number of critically ill patients across the entirety of South Korea is now just over 400. That is down sharply from well over 1,000 just a month ago. Also, as you heard from our reporter Kim Yeon-seung just before, more people are now exempt from vaccine passes from this Monday.
And also, despite health authorities urging the public to avoid traveling if possible, a new poll has found that around 50% of office workers insist that they will visit their hometowns over the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday anyway. For more, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Mary Women's Hospital in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Tan.
Good morning.
So let's start with the people who will travel over the holidays. They're choosing to travel regardless of what health authorities have recommended. Do you think this is down to pandemic fatigue?
Well, certainly there are probably multiple motivating factors, reasons why people are choosing to travel over the lunar holiday. But I should say from the beginning that the safest way to travel and gather over the holidays will be if everyone is vaccinated, boosted, and preferably tested before gathering, especially if there are going to be elderly people, elderly family members, or people with high-risk chronic medical conditions among those that are gathering. Part of the reason might be pandemic fatigue in terms of why people are gathering, but there may be also elderly parents who are living in the countryside who have not seen their children or grandchildren for maybe a year or 2 years. And they may just feel, because they are near the end of life, that there may not be another opportunity for them to gather with their family members just because the pandemic has been so prolonged. And so I think there are many reasons why people are gathering, and some family members may simply need the assistance of their family to come and visit. So even though the gathering and mixing is high risk, I think it can be done safely. And as I said, VBT, vaccinated, boosted, and tested, is probably the safest way to gather.
Okay, we've been reporting that the number of new daily infections is on the rise here in South Korea, but we're seeing a receding number of daily deaths as well as critically ill patients in hospital. A two-pronged question for you, really. Is this mostly down to the increased spread of Omicron? And compared to Delta, how many Omicron patients are being hospitalized here in South Korea, according to the latest figures?
Well, the latest figures are through January 15th. And we had a total of 5,030 confirmed Omicron cases, of which there were 6 fatalities and 7 severe cases. But we need to keep in mind that we are still early on in the epidemic curve, on the upward curve of Omicron cases in our country. And we always see a lag between new cases and hospitalizations and, of course, deaths. In terms of hospital admissions, over the last 1 week, there has been a significant increase already. So the 7-day average of new hospital admissions for the last week was 564 on average. Compared to the first week of January, that's 100 cases higher. So during that week, first week of January, there were 444 new hospital admissions on average per day. Furthermore, I'm very concerned because the number of seniors older than 60 years old newly diagnosed with COVID-19, this number has gone up significantly as of recently. So on January 18th, that number was 396. Yesterday, the number shot up to 749. The last reason why I'm very concerned about what Omicron will do in Korea is because if we look at what's going on in the UK and Israel, these are 2 countries that have actually delivered more booster shots per population than South Korea has. And yet, since the end of December, they have seen a significant increase in the number of COVID-related deaths in their country. And so even though our hospitalization, ICU cases, deaths, they are kind of at a low point right now, a trough, I think it will only be a matter of time, maybe 2-3 weeks before we start to see ICU cases and deaths increase again.
Now, Dr. Tan, let's move on to vaccine passes. As we all know, courts have overturned some of the government's vaccine pass mandates, especially those for department stores and supermarkets. But and from today, we're having more exemptions to that. What do you think about this? Do you think the system should be simplified or possibly even revoked?
I actually am in support of vaccine passes. I think this is one way that we can keep especially high-risk facilities safer for the public and for anyone who's using them. I think it's one way that we are trying to live with COVID. We're trying to prevent closing down businesses, which is what can happen if there is a large outbreak. And we know which businesses are high risk based on their physical environments. In other words, are they indoors in an enclosed space with crowding and poor ventilation? And also we have, of course, epidemiological data that support which businesses have caused the highest number of cases. We know that bars and clubs, nightclubs, also educational facilities, restaurants, churches, these are all high-risk facilities. We know because thousands of cases have been confirmed from these kinds of facilities. So I am in favor of the vaccine pass system, but of course we do need to differentiate, essential from non-essential services that are being provided by these facilities, and also we need to differentiate between risk levels as well. Perhaps a more simplified system could be put in place, but I don't think that getting rid of this vaccine pass system is going to help our country live with COVID.
Right, it just seems to be becoming an increasingly complex web right now with all these different exemptions going on and all these court rulings every day overturning this and whatever. But Dr. Tan, unfortunately we're out of time. We appreciate your insights as always and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taiwan is reporting new large-scale incursion by China's Air Force into its air defense zone, escalating tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The island's defense ministry said Sunday that 39 Chinese aircraft, including fighter jets and a bomber, entered its air defense identification zone. Taiwan's military scrambled jets issued radio warnings and deployed its air defense missile systems to monitor the fleet's activities. It's the largest incursion sent by Beijing since October 2021. The incident marks the latest in a series of what Taipei calls gray zone warfare, designed to both wear out Taiwan's forces by making them repeatedly scramble and also to test Taiwan's response. Pope Francis on Sunday installed 16 men and women as lectors and catechists, highlighting the faith and role of the laity in sharing the gospel. This marks a break with what had been church law reserving those ministries for men only, despite women performing those functions for a long time without formal designation. The 6 women who've been installed include a South Korean who's currently studying at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome.
In sports, South Korean striker Hwang Ui-jo on Sunday scored a hat-trick for the first time since joining France's Ligue 1 in Bordeaux's 4-3 home win over Strasbourg. Hwang, who had not found the back of the net for 42 days in the league before Sunday, now has 9 league goals under his belt this season. With 27 career goals in the French league, Hwang also breaks the record for most goals by a South Korean player in France. The record was previously held by Park Ju-young, who scored 25 league goals for AS Monaco. There is just around a month and a half to go until tens of millions of South Koreans head to the polls to elect their next president. But with no candidate showing a clear lead in opinion polls thus far, the race is very much still on a knife edge. Our Lee Kyung-eun has more on the factors that could potentially sway the election one way or the other in the final days.
All indications suggest that young voters aged 18 to 39 will be a deciding factor in the upcoming presidential election. While they account for roughly 1/3 of voters, nearly 30% of them are swing voters who don't support any political party. The number is significantly high compared to seniors, nearly all of whom have a clear political preference.
Many of these swing voters haven't made up their minds or could change their minds at any time. Polls show there are more female swing voters than males.
They can't easily decide because they're hesitant to support the Democratic Party due to sexual assault scandals surrounding the party in the past. They can't go for the opposition People Power Party either, as they tend to be oriented toward males.
Rather than making their decisions based on the political party, these young people make their decisions based on policies. And they go for those that reflect their interests the most. Their biggest interest is buying a house, followed by making more money and getting jobs. Environmental protection and unification between the two Koreas were among the least important. In other words, they're looking for a president who makes their lives better. Swing voters in general also seem to care about the personal issues surrounding candidates. Take a look at this graph. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung is stuck in the late 30% range. The People Power Party's Yoon Suk-yeol shows a V-shape, hitting a low point then rebounding. It's a similar pattern in other polls too. For Lee, his scandal surrounding a land development project seems to prevent him from expanding his supporter base. For Yoon, he hit low point at around the time when his wife's allegations and the party's internal troubles broke out. And that time period overlaps with when the minor opposition People Power Party's An Chol-soo's ratings went up significantly.
Those people who don't support either Lee or Yoon could have decided on An, driven by his ethical image and career. Some conservatives could also have moved from Yoon to An due to Yoon's personal issues. But those people are seemingly returning to Yoon now.
All this brings much attention to the debates, where voters can learn about candidates' policies, characters, and competency. More than a majority of voters actually say that debates will affect their decisions. The first televised debate is set for later this month. 이경은, Arirang News.
Every year, thousands of foreigners come to South Korea looking to achieve the Korean dream. But some are finding the reality is often far from their expectations. With the upcoming presidential election, Korea has a chance to lay out exact plans to protect the rights and livelihoods of migrants. Our Shin Ye-eun tells us why.
This is where migrants to South Korea start a new chapter in their lives. Many of them coming through those gates, aspiring to achieve the Korean dream. That term mirrors the American dream held by migrants to the States hoping for a better and fuller life.
This man had hoped to achieve the Korean dream by launching his own business. He moved here from Myanmar, but instead of becoming a business owner, he has been living as an undocumented immigrant for 22 years.
After my student visa expired, I tried applying for a work visa, but I couldn't because I had lost my passport. I went to the embassy to apply for a new one, but the review process has been delayed to this day, mostly because I used to be a democracy activist back home.
There are some 400,000 undocumented migrants living in Korea, making up roughly 20% of the foreign population. All have different reasons for why they remain unregistered. Same said he and his friends have tried everything to gain legal status.
I haven't been able to visit the hospital for more than 20 years, and I understand that I can't enjoy the privileges of Korea because I can't pay taxes. But I would like to know that there's a chance for people like me to become registered.
He says he could be killed if he returns to Myanmar. So he tried to seek asylum, but was asked to pay a fine of over $25,000. He said he was more than willing to do so, but asked for a bit more flexibility.
Of course I'd like to pay, but I can't. I earn a little over $2,000 a month. Half I send back home to Myanmar to my family. I'm asking the Korean government to allow me to pay bit by bit monthly.
Anna, another migrant who has lived in Korea for more than 20 years, also asked for more compassion.
I would like to consider myself as a Korean, but I haven't been naturalized yet. But my whole life is here. I met my husband here. We raise our son together. I work at a hospital here. As a Korean, I want to bring my sick mother from Russia and take care of her.
Anna is an only child. She says she's the only one left in her family who can take care of her mother. To increase the chances of sponsoring her mother with permanent residence, Anna has applied for naturalization. But even if Anna becomes Korean, there is currently no law that would allow her to sponsor her mother's visa.
If the country isn't prepared to accept foreigners as their own citizens, international marriage should be banned as a whole. It's not that I regret getting married. I just wish there were more systems for migrants to protect their rights.
Such systems are more established in the United States, which is known for its migrant associations and English learning programs.
Immigration policies take up a big part of presidential elections because the U.S. is the land of immigrants. Though policies vary based on which administration is in power, one thing doesn't change. The voices of migrants are heard. There are so many networks, associations where migrants can share information, file petitions to make change. Our association made Hangul Day and Kimchi Day in New York.
While local experts say blueprinting exemplary countries like the U.S. definitely helps, making immigration policies focused on the migrants living in Korea is even more important.
We've only started seeing foreigners come to Korea after the 1988 Seoul Olympics when local companies were short on labor. We've always remained a relatively homogeneous society, so we need to launch immigration policies appropriate to Korea's unique atmosphere. For instance, we need the public to first understand that immigrants aren't stealing our jobs.
Many migrant workers have helped immensely in manufacturing or agriculture, filling the labor shortage caused by an aging population and low birth rate. Another expert specializing in counseling and supporting immigrants said more can be done to make the most of migrant skills.
We need to give out skilled worker visas to more migrant workers. They're adding on to our national competitiveness, so we should help extend their stay and give them more room to develop relative skill sets.
He said this would only be possible if policies were made in consideration of the rights of each foreign migrant.
Currently, most immigration policies focus on marriage, but the issue of unregistered teens not being able to go to school or children born into an international household being the only ones taking what's called a multicultural family class. We need to teach the Korean public not to discriminate and respect all cultures, not just them.
With the presidential election coming up soon, I went to talk to the campaign teams of all four presidential candidates to hear their take on migrant issues. The ruling Democratic Party's candidate, Lee Jae-myung's campaign team, said it's considering making a committee for multicultural families.
We will create a multicultural committee within our party and hear what problems international families face, and then create comprehensive policies. From there, we will also try to expand discussions to include immigration policies.
The camp for main opposition, People Power Party's Yoon Sung-yeol, said it would consider tweaking the current work visa permit system to allow further economic development.
Many E9 workers reach very higher skills, sufficient skills. But nevertheless, they have to leave the country. Let such workers stay longer and also facilitate their transition into other types of other statuses, like E7, right, which are given to various kinds of skilled workers.
The Shim Sang-jung campaign team from the Justice Party said the country needs to step up its protection of refugees.
Korea needs to amend its refugee law. Refugees are basically human rights violation victims. We need to understand that their lives are at risk. We should ease the standards on who is accepted as a refugee and help them during their stay.
And the campaign team for the minor opposition People's Party leader, An Chol-soo, called for a single ministry to manage all immigration policies. Currently, 4 ministries, from the Justice Ministry to the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, are mainly responsible for immigrant issues.
We have the lowest birth rate in the world. In 3 years' time, we will be an aging society. That's why immigration will be Korea's new survival tactic. To do that, our camp believes that there should be a separate immigration office or ministry in charge of relative duties so that we can avoid excessive spending on similar policies launched by different ministries.
As all camps said, immigration policies need to be reviewed and strengthened now more than ever. These policies will determine whether migrants can actually achieve the Korean dream. 신예은, Arirang News.
Now we cross over to our OCR for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks, Mark. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, North Korea fired 4 rounds of missiles this month, once again defying United Nations resolutions. While North Korean leader Kim Jong-un barely mentioned the United States in his New Year's address, his regime now says it needs to prepare for a long-term confrontation with Washington. Pyongyang has warned that it may go back to testing nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, breaking a self-imposed freeze in place since 2018. And, well, it now looks like North Korea's up to its old tricks again. What does it want, and what lengths will it go to get it? To answer this question, we're joined by Young-Jun Kim at Korea National Defense University, who is also a member of the National Security Advisory Board of the South Korean President's Office, and Bruce Bennett, Senior Defense Analyst at RAND Corporation. Thank you both for joining us today. Now, let's begin with you, Professor Kim. Now, North Korea said that it's going to reconsider its self-imposed freeze on testing nuclear weapons and long-range missile tests over what they called hostile US moves. What do you think of the timing of this kind of announcement, and what do you think was the reason behind it?
Thank you for having me. Definitely the timing is just right before the Black presidential election, and also North Korea always want to have start this kind of provocation just like before they want to start the negotiation talks with the U.S. administration. We can remember 2017 and also 1990 Kim Jong-il period. So it is the timing absolutely aiming at the Black presidential election, also as well as they want to hook the American people's attention to the North Korean issue.
And Dr. Bennett, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. Why do you think North Korea is, pulling its sort tricks again, its sort playbook? What do you think it might want to possibly extract from the United States or South Korea this time around?
Well, I think we have to remember that Kim Jong-un is facing a fair amount of internal instability. Can't feed his people very well. He's out of consumer goods, not being able to fulfill demand there. And so he's looking for a way to look powerful. By putting pressure on the United States, he's hoping that the United States will make some concessions, as my colleague said. And I think that's the kind of thing that he hopes very much, that the U.S. is so tired of his provocations that the U.S. will compromise. I think, though, that he has to recognize that there's a danger to what he's doing, because it could affect the election in ways I don't think he wants it to do.
And, well, Dr. Bennett, it is concerning that North Korea threatened to start testing its nukes again. It hasn't done so for a couple of years, since 2017. And, well, how far along is North Korea in terms of its nuclear weapons program, and what kind of developments would worry you?
Well, I think we have to recognize that it's been almost 5 years since all of those tests that they made in 2017. And North Korea has continued to develop weapons. They've come up with new designs, undoubtedly. They have new longer-range missiles. They've only been testing their shorter-range missiles. They're very anxious, I'm sure their military is, to test these new capabilities they've been developing and make sure they work. They've had some missiles in the past that didn't work very well. So this is something they're anxious to do, to be able to have this. And I'm sure they have been putting some pressure on Kim Jong-un to justify them doing this in a way that the international community will continue to say, well, it's not a big deal. That's a mistake for Kim Jong-un. If he returns to nuclear weapon tests, the United States is forced to put serious pressure on. And even with what he's done recently, when he claims it's U.S. hostility, 6 missiles launched in 2 weeks is a tremendous amount of North Korean hostility.
And, well, Professor Kim, in recent months we've seen Just lots of countries around the world rushing to develop hypersonic glide vehicles, and North Korea, of course, has been one of them, and they claim to have tested this technology very recently, which the South Korean military dismissed. They said that it was more likely to be an ordinary ballistic missile that South Korea could have repelled. And the North, of course, hearing this response, it seemed rather annoyed about this. What is your opinion about the North's progress on these hypersonic glide vehicles? How far along do you think the regime is?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with my colleague, Dr. Bruce Bennett of the Land Corporation. And technically, in this sense, the hypersonic missile, we cannot check. Nobody cannot inspect about the North Korean hypersonic capability. And unfortunately, North Korea has a very small territory to check their capability. So this target is aiming at the mainly American people, and also North Korean people. Kim Jong-un have to show he is a strong leader. This kind of the argument from the North Korea, they have the hypersonic capability that we cannot check and we cannot trust at the moment.
And Dr. Bennett, how is the United States seeing this? How worried is it about the North's hypersonic glide vehicles? Does it pose an immediate threat?
We have to remember that, as my colleague Dr. Kim said, North Korea exaggerates its developments. They're trying to make the leader look strong. And in this case, even a Scud missile flies at hypersonic speed. It flies at Mach 5, the threshold of hypersonic, just as the engine is cutting off. So that doesn't make it a hypersonic missile. They're calling missiles hypersonic because of the speed they fly. That's not the definition of a hypersonic missile. Hypersonic missile flies at very low altitude in order to avoid defensive coverage. And that's not what Kim has fielded for all of what we can see so far. Since that's the case, the U.S. Defense Department has said, we can defend against these missiles. We can defend against Scuds, which fly up to hypersonic speed. So they haven't yet fielded what China has fielded and what Russia and the U.S. are working on, which is something that flies very fast at very low altitude.
And Professor Kim, of course, you mentioned that this hypersonic missile threat, it seems to be directed mostly at the United States for now. But say that North Korea was threatening South Korea, would we be able to, would we be capable of deflecting such vehicles with our existing anti-missile systems?
Yes, we have to prepare for for this kind of hypersonic missile capability. And no one country is able to defend at the moment the hypersonic missile capability, especially this idea, hypersonic capability is from the Russia to break the U.S. missile defense system, and even U.S. doesn't have a 100% capability to defend this kind of hypersonic missile against their territory. So anyway, the Iraq and the U.S. to prepare for this kind of hypersonic capability missile. So now it's past the two countries agree on the new strategic planning group for scenario North Korea using the nuclear and missile capability. So we will prepare for that.
Professor Kim, what would it mean for South Korea if the North begins testing nuclear weapons and long-range missiles again? How would that change the equation, and how should the ROK-US alliance really prepare for this kind of scenario?
So far, the ROK and U.S. Military does not prepare for the using of the hypersonic missile capability in the combined exercise, especially in summer and Kiribati. So we need to have the scenario against the using of the North Korean hypersonic missile user in a war scenario. So we have to include that scenario in the ROK-US combined exercise.
And well, Dr. Bennett, what do you think should be the response to this if North Korea continues to make these provocations and, continue with its threats to launch missile tests and etc.? How do you think the South Korean and the American response should be?
Well, we have to remember what North Korea considers to be the biggest threat, which is outside information. We aren't using outside information in the way that we could, that would threaten Kim Jong-un. There are many, many ways we could potentially do that. And we have some opportunities. We could invite North Koreans to come to graduate students to come to American universities. We could invite North Koreans to take American vaccine and see what difference it makes with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. They seem to be very anxious to get that. So there are a variety of kinds of information we could use with North Korea, and I don't think Kim Jong-un's going to like that. He doesn't want the outside information. Remember, even recently, he called Korean culture and K-pop a vicious cancer, which was corrupting his youth. Well, because they're learning the truth about the world, and that's something we should be helping them learn.
And while time is of the essence, and Professor Kim, President Moon, he's about to step down in just weeks. And while President Biden, meanwhile, he's quite preoccupied with Beijing, Moscow and Tehran. Meanwhile, North Korea seems to be getting angrier and even more upset. Do you see any way of de-escalating the situation right now?
Yes, already Dr. Bruce Bennett said, I absolutely agree with his side. Fascinating. Maybe we can have the exchange program between the two countries, and for students. Also, we can ask the North Korea to open the border and to get a vaccination from the United States or United Nations. Also, we can have the start a second round of the negotiation. So now Kim Jong-un want to restart the negotiation, but at the same time, Kim Jong-un had to show he is a strong leader to North Korean people. So this kind of situation makes North Korea heavy, strong military capability for preparing for another scenario, just like before Iraq presidential election.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to end the discussion here today, but that was Young-Jun Kim at Korea National Defense University and Bruce Bennett, Senior Defense Analyst at RAND Corporation. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Now, from Syria to Cameroon, the past 24 hours has been marked by deadly violence in different parts of the world. For more, joining us from the news centre is our Sung Jae. Sung Jae, from today, you're going to be giving us an overview of what's been going on around the world. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you guys as well.
So there have been deadly clashes in Syria between U.S.-backed forces and the Islamic State terror group. And this has resulted in scores of people being killed. Tell us more on that.
That's right. We're looking at a deadly clash between the U.S.-backed Kurdish-led forces and ISIL fighters, which, like you said, Mogyun has seen at least 120 killed. Now, this all started when the Islamic State attacked a Kurdish-run prison last Thursday, hoping to break out the prisoners. Now, the clash has been ongoing since then, with UK-based Syrian Observatory of Human Rights reporting that 77 IS members, 39 Kurdish fighters, including internal security forces, prison guards, and counterterrorism forces, were killed. Unfortunately, at least 7 civilians were also killed in the fighting. Now, officials say the military did recapture 104 prisoners who escaped, but the total number of those who broke out had not been determined. The prison is known to hold thousands of suspected ISIL members. Now, over to Burkina Faso this time. Protesters siding with soldiers who staged mutinies at several barracks in the country set fire to the headquarters of the ruling party in the capital. The unrest comes as soldiers staged an attempted coup demanding the sacking of the country's military top brass and the allocation of more resources for the 7-year clash against Islamist insurgents. The soldiers demanded that the top generals be replaced, while also calling for better care for injured troops and better support for the families of soldiers killed in battle. The government has denied reports of a military takeover, but are on high alert as governments in West and Central Africa have seen successful coups over the past 18 months over in Mali and Guinea. And now finally taking us over to Cameroon, this time a fire at a nightclub in the capital Yaoundé in the early hours of Sunday killed at least 16 people, while injuring at least 8 others. According to officials, the incident was caused by the explosion of fireworks used inside the nightclub, adding that it caused fire to break out in the ceiling and led to further explosions and panic in the venue. The tragedy also comes as Cameroon is currently hosting the African Cup of Nations.
Good morning. The mild stretch of weather that started over the weekend continues today. The temperature will not bother you much, but it's that toxic dust that will choke many of us in the West. And especially those in Chungcheong-Namdo province are dealing with very bad air pollution this morning. Meanwhile, the East Coast and Jeju could be seeing sleet, while mountainous regions could see 1 to 3 centimeters of snowfall this morning. While central regions will be under mostly sunny skies today, while southern provinces will be covered with lots of clouds. Temperatures in the capital will be about 8 degrees higher than season norms today. Lows are starting out at about 2 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Busan at about 5 degrees. We could perhaps feel spring-like warmth by the afternoon as high in Seoul will hike up to 9 degrees. Daejeon and Busan topping out at 10 degrees Celsius this afternoon. But these spring-like temperatures will not last that long. Readings will go back to norms as the week goes on. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back at 8 a.m. Korea time on Tuesday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Kim Mo-kyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you're watching us in the world. And thank you as always for joining us. Until tomorrow, goodbye.
Everyone knows I'm passionate. Know why? Look at how passionate Koreans are. And you know I'm fast. Don't blink. Koreans move fast too. I'm creative on the pitch. People say I'm smart. Just look how smart Korea is. I aim to be spectacular for the fans. Why am I so fun? Is it because Korea is so much fun? Visit Korea and find out for yourself. See you there. This is my Korea. What's yours?
저는 메이저리그보다 태극마크를 단 마운드가 더 자랑스럽습니다. 내가 대한민국이다 라는 자부심이죠. 재외선거도 마찬가지죠. 대한민국의 내일을 내가 만들어 간다는 거 멋지지 않나요? 마치 가슴에 태극마크처럼 재외 유권자 여러분, 전 세계 어디서나 소중한 한 표 꼭 행사해 주세요. 여러분의 한 표가 바로 대한민국의 태극마크입니다. 아름다운 선거, 행복한 대한민국. 중앙선거관리위원회.
When the lantern of wisdom and mercy lights up, a traditional cultural festival unfolds. All hearts connect as one. The wave of traditional lanterns that light up the heart and the world flows. Joy overflows as people experience events, performances where people come together in harmony. When flowers fall like rain on the world, illuminated with wisdom and mercy, we all become one. And happiness flows as we hold each other's hands.